Hey, if you can cheers. Here's to having a great time talking.
For the next 4 hours.
Yeah.
Kanpai.
To no
Kanpai.
more technical difficulties.
Mm-hmm.
Kanpai.
Kanpai.
Ooh, well said.
That's Japanese.
Correct.
All right. For our listeners out there, we just were 2 hours late
Yeah.
to our own podcast.
Oopsie.
So here we have the one and only Lauren Purvis. Did I say that right? Did I say your last name right?
Hello. Yes, correct.
Okay, perfect.
There she is.
And you know, she's really mad about the delay.
There was just an hour of technical difficulties and then an hour of talking her down.
Completely furious.
But I think we're gonna spend this time together making it up to you.
Yeah.
Oh, the reality is I just had an extra hour to really enjoy a very lengthy matcha moment, and that's all I could ask for.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
We love to hear it.
Are people able to see Miss Lauren on the video?
Yeah, absolutely.
What's going on behind you there? You got you have a tapestry of sorts.
Oh yeah, this is my little home studio office. This is a nabori, which is very they're like advertising banners. You know how in America you have like the Wiggly Men? Yeah, well, in Japan they have much nicer advertising banners, and this banner says Uji Matcha. Those two characters at the bottom are matcha. There it is, matcha. And this is granted to me via the Kyoto Tea Cooperative because we only sell very legitimate matcha.
Whoa, that's something we're going to have to get into.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-oh.
Oh, yeah.
That's going to happen.
Not us getting into it, but we're going to dig into that subject.
Absolutely.
Exactly. Maybe we could just start with how we know you, Lauren,
Yeah.
I mean, this is my first time meeting you, but
screen to screen.
Screen to screen. But a gentleman by the name of Kent Sheridan. How did you guys know each other, you and Kent?
Oh, man. That goes way back to the land before time. And I almost don't even remember.
With Littlefoot?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I almost don't even remember. TBH. Oh, you know what? It just came back to me. Wow. I think it must have been like 2015 or 2016, somewhere in there. And bringing it all the way back, I'm married to an Oregonian. His name's Dan. My husband was raised in Central Oregon in a very, very, very tiny town called Sisters, which is pretty ironic because he lives in a family of like 5 boys. Like he's the youngest of 5 boys. So for him to be raised in a town called Sisters is just funny to me. Anyway, Sisters is 20 minutes outside of this town called Bend, Oregon. And Bend, Oregon has a lot of coffee shops. Some really lovely coffee shops. And one of the loveliest coffee shop in Bend is called Palette Coffee. And we walked in and there was this gentleman named Kent who was just kind of hanging out there and working there. And you know those people that just kind of give off fun, like an attitude of fun. And we looked at Kent and we took one look at Kent. And we're like, you're fun. Can we be your friend? And Kent thought we were pretty fun too.
We must know you.
Yeah, it was one of those like instant click connections. And I feel like that's how a lot of people connect with me in life. I either connect with you right away and we're best friends, or you're just more of my acquaintance,
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
how are you feeling about us?
Yeah, we will see.
I feel I'm getting the aura of fun. I'm not, okay, truly, I'm not huge into auras whatsoever, but like you give off a lot of fun. You can just feel it.
For a second there, I thought you were like really into auras.
Yeah, good thing you backpedaled on that. Hey,
No.
were you already married to Dan, the Oregonian man, when you made your way to Palette Coffee?
Indeed. Yes. Yeah. I met Dan 2 days after I started Mizuba Tea Company. So they're the same age.
Wow.
Okay.
hmm So that was 2013.
Gotcha.
2013. Man, you guys are you're just rolling. You're rolling. So for those that don't know, Kent is a good friend of ours. He's from the area that Valor is located in of the world. And he moved out to Oregon and started a company called Voila Coffee.
Yeah.
And I wish they were still producing the best instant coffee in the world, because it was very good.
I don't know if y'all can
But
see
Kent's
this.
still a good friend of us, and he's still doing. Oh, look at that! The Mizuba
Hey.
Voila. Yeah,
Yeah.
that
That's
stuff
awesome.
is good. You guys ever had that?
Precious.
I never had it.
I had
Never
it.
had it.
It was very good. But Kent's doing great things now, and he's near and dear to us.
Mhm.
But I think I remember this one time you and Kent were together, and Kent called me and said, "Hey, this is Lauren. You need to use her matcha." And then we did.
We kind of just did.
Yeah.
Seems like you deeply trust Kent.
Oh yeah, with my life.
Yeah. Well, I think at the time, when was that? We've been using Mizuba pretty much since we opened the cafe, right? Or was it even before that, the pop-up?
I think it's been about 3 or 4 years, so maybe a little bit before the cafe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. But it's been a great decision. We've done some fun social media type of things together.
Mhm.
I think, Ethan, I'm really surprised that you aren't wearing your Matcha Madness tee today.
Have you seen those, Lauren? Do you have one?
Oh my gosh. I'm kicking myself right now, y'all, because I should be wearing my t-shirt.
Me too. I just bought a new shirt at a flea market and I wanted to wear it, and that's why I'm wearing this shirt.
That is really impressive.
It's almost a mock neck.
Wow.
I know, it's from 1991. It's like so old. Like the oldest thing I've ever
That
heard
is
of.
so old.
1991. Are you kidding me? But yeah, that shirt is probably one of the greatest things we've ever done, which was, I think it was 2021 that we decided how many matchas can we sell in the year of March. And we called it Matcha Madness. And it was awesome. That was one, I think we talked about it before. That was like a peer-led initiative.
Yes.
Which was really cool. And then we just wanted to step in and support it even further in 2022 by making a t-shirt that said, I survived like Valor's Matcha Madness 2022, and then doing like a huge giveaway and partnering with Mizuba for that giveaway, right? Was that
Yeah, for sure.
that's the meat and potatoes of it? Yeah, such a sweet time.
That was a sweet time. Oh, I would say even from across the country, we could feel the fervor and the enthusiasm and just every matcha moment at Valor, like it was felt across the country.
Wow.
Wow.
Shockwaves across the nation.
Yeah,
Colored green.
The first year we did it, when it was loose, it was like, I think we got to 1,000 like right there at the end.
Mhm.
And then the next year when it was a thing, I mean, I think it took like no time.
2 weeks.
Yeah,
maybe.
a couple weeks to get to 1,000 matchas.
I have to say that is incredible. That is
That's
absolutely
music
incredible.
to your ears right there, Lauren.
It's not only music to my ears, yeah, but it's also music to, I think, the producers and farmers I work with, because this will direct the narrative arc of the podcast perhaps, but a lot of people don't know that the Japanese tea industry as a whole is actually on the decline. And so a lot of people take matcha for granted, and they, over here we see green powder everywhere. But what a lot of people don't know is that matcha as a term is not regulated. So that means that matcha as a tea will always be powdered green tea, but not all powdered green tea is actually matcha. And so this is like the bad news and the good news part of the podcast, is that the bad news is that 4 out of every 5 tea producer in Japan has actually quit in the past 20 years. But the good news is that we have a lot of hope, because really awesome coffee shops and just tea enthusiasts like Valor, like cool specialty places that want to really make high quality things accessible. They do fun things like this. They really celebrate matcha. They want people to survive matcha madness, and they, like, what your shop
We
does.
do.
And yeah, exactly. And so I think y'all can really speak to like how maybe in the past, like high quality things have had an approachability issue. Like maybe people don't think it's just, maybe things are too fancy for them, maybe too austere or something.
Mhm.
But I think what you've done really well is create a space where you can still have really high quality experiences, but still have fun.
Yes.
Nice.
And at the end of the day, I mean, a lot of people can afford coming into a cafe and, at the most dropping $7 on a drink. It's like but it's like the best in that category of drinks. Like some of the best coffee or the best latte you can get isn't hundreds of dollars. It's like ones of dollars, like $7 max, which is, I love that about our industry, that it is like a volume business because every transaction is smaller, but this accessibility of that is something that's really appealing to me.
And so when I get to email my farms back and tell them like, wow, this one shop shared 1,000 matcha moments, that gives my friends in Japan a lot of hope and a lot of like, wow.
Amazing.
I love it. Yeah, so maybe we can start. I want to hit on so much, but if we could start with you, I want to know, give us a little bit of an idea of your background and how you got into the tea business.
Yeah, that's a fun story. And it's a story that I always, every time I talk about it, I'm still very wide-eyed. And a lot of people, when they ask me what I do, and I say, oh, I own a tea company, they're like, really? And I'm like, really? Like, I do? Oh, I do.
I guess
But
I do.
all I have is my story, and this is the tale of what happened to me. So we'll go back. I'm a big chronological storyteller, so we always go way back.
Please.
I was 11 years old. I was a kid in Santa Barbara, California. My family is we put a high value on food. We love food. We love experiencing life through food. a lot of my memories, like, and I think you guys can relate to this too, are just like experiential through flavor and taste in food. My mom happened to be friends with Julia Child, if you know that person.
I think we do.
Wow.
So I sadly never got to meet Julia Child, but I kind of was there because my mom was pregnant with me. So I was there, just not conscious. But like, yeah, I wasn't allowed to be a picky eater. And my parents never really were like, here is tea, you should like it, but I think just with all the conversations and like Food Network was on my TV 24/7. Like it never turned off. So we just osmosised a lot of like vocabulary about food. And I think my mom would give me Constant Comment by Bigelow. Are you familiar? It is a heritage classic heritage tea company in America. And you probably had it without realizing it. It's in every grocery store. Anyway, Bigelow is really, really famous for their tea called
Bigelow,
yeah. Oh yeah. So they're really famous for that tea
It
called
kind of
Constant
hit
Comment.
me.
Yeah, exactly. So Constant Comment was like this blend of really warming like cinnamon spices and orange peel and like a little secret zest, of course, that they have. But my mom would give me that tea every single morning before school. And,
Wow.
yeah, this was like middle school. I was 11. And then throughout the years, I was like, Mom, like, I think there's more to life than Bigelow. No shade, but I was just like, there's more to tea, I think, because like I was experiencing flavors in so many other things, and I was like, is there more than just a tea bag? Because in the 90s, where I come from, 1990 particularly, in the 90s, I remember my parents, they would refer to tea as like Snapple. You know, I remember driving around, my mom would be like, oh, let me get my tea. And I was like, it was a peach Snapple. So you kind of like had that frame of reference. A lot of Americans were like, tea was equated to just iced tea, maybe. And then if they had like a hot tea, it would be like a tea bag that was dunked into boiling water. And a lot of people didn't really like tea because it tasted really, really bitter because everybody was just boiling the heck out of tea bags. So I kind of, through high school, started exploring more into tea just on my own. I was a normal kid. I liked music. I liked sports, you know. But for some reason, I fell down the proverbial rabbit hole into tea, like got super deep on it as like a total nerd, like all the books, all the fake online classes with, you know, oh, here's your printable tea sommelier certification. You know?
Wow.
Cool.
Yeah. We all fell into some rabbit hole like that. Mine just happened to be tea. And so that was high school. I worked 3 jobs in high school and ended up collecting just all these teas from around the world, and went to college, would share all these teas. And it was kind of funny because like if you go to college, like you kind of are in that stage of life where you're like, what am I going to do the rest of my life? Who am I supposed to be? What is vocation? Like all that sort of stuff. And I thought I was always just, okay, I'm going to go to school. I'm going to get a degree. I'm an English major. For some reason, I decided like specializing in Charles Dickens was like, I don't even know. That was like my literature focus. I did also, as like a future planning thing, I was like, okay, I'm going to pursue journalism. So I was into writing, and I was like, well, I love so many different things. At least if I can't be very good at them, I can write about them, you know? So I was pursuing journalism, and like really long story short, 2013 was when I graduated college. Yeah. And my senior year, I had a friend who went to go teach English in Japan, and a very close family friend. And he was like, hey, you should come visit. And my family and I were like, yeah, free place to stay in Japan. Let's go. So I like knew there'd be good tea there. I just had zero frame of reference for how good the tea would be. And I think a lot of people might have that experience in any origin country, be it like France for wine or Italy for wine, or like, you know, anything like that. If you're actually in a place where they produce a product and you get to experience it firsthand, it really opens up your understanding of what you're consuming, I guess. So, this is just a little bit about who I am. But the minute I touch down in a foreign country, like the very first place I need to go is the grocery store. Like, have to go. So we landed in Tokyo. It was midnight. That's like Disneyland to me, because if I can't understand anything on the label, and it's all food, I'm like, wow, the world of opportunity is amazing. So midnight, Tokyo, landed on, went straight to the grocery store, and like the very first section that I went to, you might be able to guess, was the tea section. And I was hit very hard within that moment. And like a lot of people talk about it like a light bulb moment, and it's funny because it sounds so cheesy, but it really does happen to people. And I went to the tea section. I went to like the lowest shelf because it was the cheapest. And I just bought a ton of tea. And I realized like even the cheapest tea in that store was 20 times better than anything I'd ever had in America. And that was not so long ago. That was just 2013. So, you know, I just was a senior in college, off a college budget, and thinking like, wow, like that really means quality is really accessible here, you know? And I was so used to paying a lot for like good tea, because also I still think to this day, there's a lot of people in this country that don't know what tea has the potential to be. And that's what I get really excited about, is sharing that experience. But so just realizing like, whoa, this is accessible and quality. Those two things are really, really important to me. And so I wasn't even planning on owning a business. I had wanted nothing to do with business, and I hate numbers and math, but here we are. And again, still like planning on journalism. And so anyway, had the grocery store revelation, as we'll call it. And then the second thing that happened is that I think to some degree we experience this here, and especially if you're in coffee and we live this beautiful interaction day in and day out. When you serve a beverage to someone, you really connect with people, and like you can really build community over beverages. But for me, when I was in Japan and not really speaking the language that well, and you know, communication barrier, but every single time I met somebody, there was always just tea there. I didn't even have to ask for it. It was just magical, you know? And for somebody who grew up loving tea, I was like, this is the dream. And I realized like that gave me this huge light bulb of like, wow, Lauren, like this is how you make friends. Like you don't even speak the language fully and you can still communicate somewhat over this beverage. And then like going back to my mom, it really like gave me the light bulb of like, wow, I like loved the fact that she gave me tea every morning, but it's also more about spending time with my mom too. It's not just the tea. You can have like the best tea and the highest quality tea on the planet, but I think the majority of people don't realize that they might not fully enjoy that tea unless they're sharing it with somebody else. So that hit me really hard over there. And these are two very long, drawn-out experiences that happened to me. But the third and final thing on that trip was I accidentally met a matcha producer. And here we are.
How do you stumble into meeting a matcha producer?
Yeah. So we were traveling, and I mentioned we flew into Tokyo, but my friend who we were visiting, we kind of traveled all around. And we were in Kyoto. And Kyoto's historically a very, very wonderful tea growing region. And it just so happens that this little area in Kyoto Prefecture called Uji is like the premier historically revered growing region in the world for matcha. I had never heard about Uji until I went to Japan. And so my parents and my friend and I were we took a day trip south of Kyoto, and like on the way back, and here's the thing, when you travel into Japan, like guaranteed you will get lost. It's just gonna happen, and it's great, it's wonderful. You're just the trains move fast, and you need to know it's just part of the experience there. But on the way back, we were planning on coming back to Kyoto from our day trip, and the train stopped. And like you have to make a split-second decision. You're either going to be on the train or you're jumping off the train. There's like, you can't really hesitate if you're going to maybe get off. But this train pulled into a very small stop called Uji. And my dad had a little guidebook, and there was like literally one sentence in the guidebook about Uji. And the sentence read, birthplace of excellent tea, or something like that. And so I threw everyone off the train.
Sold.
Yeah. I said, everybody get off. And it's about 25 minutes outside
Not just
of Kyoto.
my family. Everybody.
Everyone. Yeah, no, just whoever was with me. And so it was such a fast decision, but it ended up being like one of the most life-changing afternoons, literally, that I've ever had. And we were just there for an afternoon. Wow. But in Japan, towns like if it's famous for something, usually like all the shops and restaurants are themed like around that thing. So in Uji, it's a very, 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 very small town. There, like you can walk within maybe like 40 minutes, like the length of the little downtown. So like I was strolling down the main street, and everywhere I looked, there's tea noodle houses, tea ceramic stores, tea dessert shops, tea shops. I mean, zillions of tea shops. And I was losing my mind. So you get to talking, and I was talking to people, and they realized like this girl was kind of crazy about tea. And they kept saying like, you need to talk to this person. Like you need to connect with this person. Cause I kept asking like, where can I get like really good matcha? Like this is exciting. And I actually only had matcha once before going to Japan. It was 2016. No, sorry, 2006. Wow. 2006 was the first time I had matcha. I had a lot of matcha by the time 2016 rolled around. Just kidding. So 2006, my brother brought a can of matcha home. And
Ooh.
yeah, we didn't really know what it was. I was just like, this is powder tea, huh? Because at that point I was like really deep into oolongs and stuff. But yeah, then discovered what matcha could be. And so I got the contact information of this matcha producer, this heritage matcha producer who's ran his family's operation. It's been in his family for 100 years. And we are his exclusive supplier in America now. So anyway,
Wow.
how that happened though is I was still set. This was spring break of my senior year. So I was still set to graduate, and I was enrolled in a publishing grad school to like be a really nerdy literature editor. And the whole time I was in grad school, I was emailing with this matcha producer. And the week after I graduated that program, the matcha producer emailed me back and said, "Can you sell my tea in America?" And I said, "Yep, that's how Mizuba
Dude,
started."
way to jump right in. Wow.
And that's how Mizuba
So
started.
awesome.
I actually don't remember saying yes to starting the company. It was my dad and my best friend from college who brought home like incorporation papers, and they're like, "Here, you should sign this, and you're doing this now."
Oh my gosh.
I'm still doing it.
And that was in, you said 2013, like when you kind of officially started as Mizuba.
August 19th, 2013.
All right, so you kind of get started with the producer side of it, and then it's like, okay, I have this matcha to sell. Now what? Like,
Yeah.
where did you go from there? How did you find people to buy it?
That's a great question because, as you heard, I did not study business whatsoever, like at all. My best friend, as I mentioned, was a
Yes,
business
same.
major. And so all I knew how to do, actually, I was terrified when my first shipment of tea showed up on my doorstep. I was like, oh my gosh, what do I, how do I get it into people's hands?
How much
Like,
was it?
it was small. Like I think I got like maybe 100 or so tins, and
Hey.
oh man, I'm gonna have to look at that invoice. I don't even remember. I think maybe
What's the shelf life on that like?
You can store matcha unopened for 12 months.
Oh, cool.
Hey.
That's
Nice.
great for someone.
So in
starting a
case you
business.
wanted to get a ton of matcha for Valor, you can in one go if you wanted to.
Nice.
Perfect.
Noted.
Were you kind of like, okay, well, all I have to do is sell 2 of these a week and I will be okay.
Oh, I didn't even think about it like that. I was like, okay, Lauren knows how to throw tea parties. I know how to have tea parties with people, and not in a like grandma sense, like I just really liked hanging out with people over tea. And the thing is, Santa Barbara, I was in Santa Barbara at the time. Santa Barbara is very, very small, and the food community is very small, albeit very great. So, my family has been in that town for 30 something years. And so I was like, if I wanted the best matcha ice cream, who would I go to? If I wanted the best matcha at a coffee shop, who would I go to? And actually, at that time, there was literally like one specialty shop in Santa Barbara, so that worked out.
Was it the French press?
It was. You know the French press?
Oh. We're just longtime listeners of the Cat and Cloud Coffee podcast.
Oh, Truby.
And,
Yeah.
I think they're friends of that world, and so that's what I think about when I think of Santa Barbara.
Well,
I
very,
think
very.
of my favorite sitcom, Psych.
Ooh. Was Psych there when you were there?
Do I like absolutely none of that show was set in Santa Barbara except for the intro.
What?
What about the like drone
What?
shots?
Sorry.
Like wasn't that?
Yeah,
the-
maybe
Drone
some of the
shots
drone
only.
shots, but I watched the first. Okay, I hope this doesn't ruin anything for anybody, but I watched the first episode of that show, and I was like, I think because
Spoiler
they
alert.
go up to a forest or whatever. I'm like, there's no forest in Santa Barbara. What are they doing?
Nothing you can say or do will make me like Psych less. So it's
Okay,
He's
that's fine.
obsessed.
Gotcha. Well, from what I gathered, and of course, granted, I only watched one episode. From what I gathered, like just the intro theme is a few snapshots of SB, but really, sorry.
SB.
But I want to go back to the French press. Because
Please.
that's super deep in my world. So I met my husband at the French press.
No way.
No
Wow.
way. The Oregonian man? What was he doing down in SB?
Yeah, I know. So, I mean, this is probably the story of most baristas, right? But Dan is my husband. And he and his brother, Nick Purvis, who was like 5th in the nation at one of the barista championships. He and Dan at one point, I forgot what year it was, but they road tripped from Canada and their goal was to go to Mexico and surf the whole way down. But they got stuck in Santa Barbara, quote unquote, and decided to just stay there and get jobs at a coffee shop. So,
wow.
Whoa.
yeah. So Nick managed the French press for a while. Nick and Dan were, I think they were like 3 or 4 years. Yeah. And I was just there. And this, you guys, I'll be really real with you. The first time I met Dan, I ordered the most embarrassing drink. And
tell us what the drink is.
Yeah. It was at a time
Put it on air.
I kind of grew up on church coffee, which is called, it's decaf coffee with honey and milk. And I loved that. I loved church coffee. But then like as a young 22-year-old, you kind of just got caught up in things. And I thought I only needed a decaf non-fat latte. And back then that was embarrassing. That was embarrassing, you guys. Because to my knowledge, like non-fat really kind of doesn't exist in coffee shops. And also like, it's not like, why would you ever order non-fat milk? Like ever? Why would you do that? Strong opinions.
Because you're too chicken to order water. I don't know.
Yeah, Ethan, do you want to tell the story about this is a deep cut about non-fat milk at Valor?
Yeah, are you ready, Lauren? Are you ready for a story?
I just took a sip of matcha, so I think I'm good.
Well, probably the worst or the heaviest hitting customer interaction we had was because a woman wanted non-fat milk, and at that time we didn't have it, but we were just like watering down whole milk, and people would be like, yeah, that's fine. But we just made it for her, and then she proceeded to really give us the business, and it was tough. So people, the non-fat milk community is maybe small, but they're strong. All right.
They're potent.
Really?
They're potent.
They're still out
they
there?
mean business. They're still out there, though.
Oh.
Yeah.
We probably go through, so we have, it's technically skim milk. So I guess it's like 1% milk fat or something. We go through probably 4 to 6 gallons of that a week, just to give you an idea that, you know, there's still skimmies out there. Skimmers, whatever you want to call them. But we go through about like maybe 60 gallons of whole milk. So like 1 out of 10 gallons is skim and 1 is whole, or 9 are whole. Anyway, so skim milk really hits it. It's close to home. Yeah. So decaf non-fat latte.
It was really embarrassing.
Anything to sweeten it up? Would you do honey, or do you just go straight up?
I ordered it iced, but he messed up my drink, so it's fine. But so I ordered an iced non-fat decaf latte, and it was interesting because the hospitality climate in Santa Barbara at that time was like, I don't think a barista had ever spoken to me before. It was kind of the era of pretension, and I was actually really caught off guard when Dan wanted to talk to me. And so I was at the register, I was paying for this drink, and the first words my future husband ever spoke to me were, "Do you always drink decaf?" And I was caught off guard because I thought, oh no, like here's this really fancy barista and he's making fun of me. And so I was kind of like on the defensive and I was like, oh no, like, I at the time I thought caffeine made me sick, which is such a lie. But that's how I was raised, I guess. And so I was like, yeah, caffeine just kind of makes me sick. And he was like, oh, and he was such a gentleman. He was like, oh no, like that's cool. I'm actually really into tea myself. And I was like, whoa, hold up. Like I had actually at that point never heard a male say, I like tea. And I was 22. I don't know. I just, yeah. And
Breaking
so
barriers.
totally, I was like, whoa. And then he caught me really off guard. I just really didn't know what to do with myself. And except I kind of gathered my wits about me as like kind of testing. I was like, really? Like, oh yeah. Do you like tea? Yeah. Are you sure?
Yeah. How about oolongs? You like those too?
That's hilarious. Because I said, oh yeah, what kind? And he goes, oh, I'm actually really into oolong. And then I, dropped it.
You said, marry me, Dan.
That's funny.
Then he was like, how do you know my name? And then you were like, shut up.
Shut up, Dan.
Wow, beautiful.
That's amazing.
Story.
So you kind of have tea to attribute your, in a way, your relationship with your husband, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, straight up.
Bit.
If he never said I like tea, I don't know what I would have done. So yeah, he proceeded to make my ice drink hot because everybody was just flustered. So
they're like, wait, a barista's talking to a customer. Everybody just malfunction, system malfunction.
System malfunction. So French press, now called Dune Coffee, is they're as they would say, our tight bros.
Tight bros.
Mm-hmm.
How do we get on that? Were we just talking about?
Well, she was talking
Santa
about
Barbara.
selling tea.
Yes.
And so she was like, best coffee shop to sell the tea. And I was like, French press?
Uh-huh.
And then she was, sorry.
Yeah.
So you were looking for people. Did you do it?
So that's funny. Dan quickly became somewhat of a complication in me selling tea to the French press because I didn't want to come in to that coffee shop straight away and be like, I'm dating your barista, buy my tea, So the French press did not start selling matcha or matcha in general till a year after I started my company. And then it was time when I was like, hey, I've been here long enough. Like, let me teach you how to do this, But I will say it's called Dune Coffee now. Sometimes I call it the French Dune Press, but it's now Dune Coffee. And even regardless if they were not our best friends or not, but they sell about 1 kilo of matcha a week. Which, if you're unfamiliar, 1 kilo of matcha is about 400 teaspoons. So that's about 400 drinks a week, I think. On average. That's an average.
Nice.
Yeah.
Shout out Dune Coffee. Check that out.
Hometown
Dune
heroes.
Coffee and matcha. Maybe we should call them.
Yeah, there we go.
I have a question. It's going back to something you said earlier. You said you had 3 jobs in high school, correct?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
First of all, if you don't mind sharing, what were those jobs? And like, I would imagine that having 3 jobs in high school made you more equipped to start a new business, like the grind that comes with that.
You're really correct. And it was funny because at the time I, obviously wasn't thinking about, oh, I'm an entrepreneur, but I taught guitar lessons. I taught horseback riding lessons. And I didn't teach those 2 at the same time, although I love the visual. And then I was I was a receptionist at a tennis club.
So 2 of those were kind of entrepreneurial, right? Because I mean, you had to get guitar clients and what's the other term for riding horses?
Equestrian?
Equestrianal,
Yes.
clients. But anyways, when you said that, I was like, wow, I bet that really laid the foundation for, for us just starting a business. There's those moments of hopelessness where you feel like, man, the only way over this wall is to like plow right through it and just keep
Mm-hmm.
going. And
100%.
having 3 jobs at one time in high school would definitely develop that kind of character trait.
I would say you're absolutely correct. And it's funny because when, as you're a high schooler and you're kind of just, I think my parents were super awesome and supportive of like, oh, you love doing this. You can do this. Why don't you, teach or something? And they gave me a lot of freedom in pursuing that and kind of making it my own. It was very cool. And I wasn't thinking as a high schooler, like, look at me, I'm a business owner, I'm an entrepreneur. I was like zero thought about that. It was just a natural extension of like, I love doing these things and I know how to do them. And then people would ask if they could like hang out and learn,
That's definitely a theme that I can tell carries on with Mizuba. Like you get all this matcha in and you're like, crap, what am I going to do with this? And so you, like you said, you threw tea parties and you enjoyed it. And so that passion was infectious to other people. So that's another really cool thing that's kind of seems like it's been throughout your whole life.
Yeah. And it was really sweet too, because that first year, like you said, I think when you find yourself responsible for your own work, it can be absolutely terrifying. And so the first year I cried a lot, not going to lie, it was terrifying. But the sweet moments were when, and I don't think I put a lot of expectation on it, but I was always really pleasantly surprised when people would say yes to a 22-year-old girl with kilos of green powder being like, hey, you want to hang out with me and have a tea party? And more often than not, there were so many people that were like, come on over. I would love to have tea with you. And so I think it was a really sweet, supportive space. Really surprised at how many people and how many business owners and chefs and cafe owners and boutique owners and juice bar owners and all sorts of people were like, yeah, come on over. So it was a very cool time.
Did you find yourself having to source lower grade matcha in the beginning so that because like maybe at the time people didn't view matcha as like this high end specialty item and they were using it in their like cakes and stuff or were you able to, I guess, just tell me about what your product looked like and how that was received in the market?
That is such an interesting question, and nobody's ever asked me that before. I feel so fortunate in the fact that, again, I wasn't even looking at business like I need to sell this. It was more of like, this is the tea that I know I love, and that's quality. And this is great. And I'm going to import it. Mm-hmm. I've never imported lower quality tea to my purview and to my producers, like in our eyes. It's so interesting. There is so many convoluted conversations about culinary versus ceremonial matcha. And that's a whole nother podcast. I could totally teach a whole class about that. But I think what's interesting is that given my food background, and I always started out with the idea that if you're going to put tea in a beverage or a cake, I still want it to be quality. I think there is a line where like you don't want to put like maybe an award-winning super difficult to produce rare cultivar matcha in a latte just because you'd lose the nuance of that flavor. It might be the best latte you've ever had, but is it the best use case for that tea? So there's obviously lines for that, but I think for in the categories that I was selling tea for, if you're going to have a latte, I still wanted it to be an excellent latte. I wasn't going to put something of low quality in it just because it's cheaper. Because also I think just the people I met and the tea that they had and the heritage they're representing, there's still a lot of honor in designing a tea that is perfect for that use case. So that's really how we approach our tea. Like, of course, it has to be accessible, and that's a huge part of what Mizuba does, but like our mission is basically to make high quality tea accessible. And by working directly with the farms, we're able to do that. And we work really closely with our farmers. So I always ask them, as like, okay, like we want tea that is representative and true to Uji tradition, which means it's shade grown, it's stone milled, and air shipped right away, so it doesn't lose any of the quality. But we need it for cafes, and so there might be a lot of people out there that'd be like, I just need something cheap. But I think what all I have is the relationships I have with the producers, and this is what they're proud to purvey. So for cafe use, my farmers actually designed a tea that is strong and smooth enough to still have a backbone when you add ingredients to it, right? Like maybe you've had a matcha latte that gets totally lost in the milk and you're like, I'm kind of just tasting green milk, versus actually experiencing the flavor of matcha and have it being complemented by the milk. It's just like a cappuccino. Like I think a lot of people talk about the analogies of like how really floral espresso can kind of get lost sometimes in lattes and cappuccinos. You could totally agree with me or disagree. But
Agree.
yeah, agree. Like coffee roasters design coffees to be paired with milk, and like my farmers also do the same thing with their teas. It's like we design for use case, but still at the highest quality.
Can you break that down a little bit? Like,
Yeah.
because gosh, there's so much I want to get into here. I don't know where to go. But like when I think about what you're saying, as far as choosing certain coffees that go with milk, or choosing certain coffees that are better on like a delicate pour over, I think of a few things. There's like different levers you can pull. There's different variables you can manipulate to make those different things happen. Like an Ethiopian, a coffee that's from Ethiopia, it's washed, it's an heirloom, variety. It's just clean, it's delicate. And then, we source it, we bring it here. A big part of that is price point. It's probably going to be a higher price point. So we're probably not trying to throw that like in our main blend for espresso. So we get it here to the roastery, and then we roast it lighter than, a coffee that we'd be trying to pair milk with. So I'm wondering, what is the analog to that in your world? Like when you say the farmers, sort of made this product that was better for milk, or maybe one that's better to be drank on its own because it's really delicate. Like, how do they manipulate those different variables? What are the variables?
It's a great question.
Sure. That is an excellent question. And we're going to get like deep into horticulture. So it's interesting. A lot of people think I got into matcha, especially like these days, and because of the wellness side. And matcha has been very adopted and embraced by the wellness side of industries, I guess, or trends. But my mom's a horticulturist. We love gardening. I'm like way more deeply entrenched in the agriculture, in the production and growing of the actual tea and specialty tea than like for its health properties. But that's a whole nother conversation too. So looking at the plant itself, right? So a lot of the variables that matcha can have are so cultivar plays a big role. I feel like I need to take a few step backs, because when we were talking about quality, there's some foundational things, right? What is matcha? Like, what actually is matcha? Matcha has to come from Japan. It has to be shade grown, which I've mentioned before. It has to be stone milled. And it has to be from all tea comes from the same plant. So Tensha is the appropriate term of shade grown tea leaf. So you might see a lot of companies that say like, oh, we have this matcha made from Girakuro or Sencha. And that's not actually matcha. And there's a lot of confusion in that. So I'm trying to say there's like a lot of variables that can play into how, like, what flavor the tea has. It's kind of like, it's a little bit like coffee, where you have different varietals of the coffee plant, right? And when I talk about cultivars, like some cultivars are stronger or more resistant to frost or have different flavor nuances. And so, I can also go in so many different directions.
Wait, I have a question first.
Yeah.
Can I ask a really basic question? What is a cultivar?
That's what I was gonna go for. I was like, okay, I need to go all the way back, right? So
I love it.
just think that the very simplistic answer to your question is that how a tea is produced and how a tea is grown and how a tea is harvested affects everything in terms of flavor, how you use it. It's all in production. And I would say the same for coffee, right? I mean, you have the extra step of roasting, but that's also part of production, right? So everything from let's just start with the plant. So very beginning, all tea comes from the same plant. Not everybody knows that yet.
Wake up.
Genius.
So Camellia Sinensis, right? That is the tea plant. Sorry guys, if it's mint, chamomile, rooibos, or mate, that's not actually tea. It's okay. Those are tisanes. But let's just talk about tea. So within tea, how you produce that plant will get you all thousands of different styles of tea. So in the most basic categories, you have white, green, yellow, oolong, black, and pu'er, which is its own thing. But when we're talking about matcha, we're talking about a green tea. So this is like the iceberg. You've got the tea plant, you've got different production styles will give you different types of tea, green tea. Within green tea, different countries, you've got thousands of different styles of green tea. So like China, zillions of styles of green tea. Japan, lots of different styles of green tea. So you've got sencha, matcha, gyokuro, kama iri cha, keep going. So within those styles, matcha, okay, we're back to matcha. I just had to set that foundation. How matcha is made is you take that tea plant, and shade growing is like the most important thing about matcha. So plants grow in the sun, right? Everybody, they grow in the sun. But they found out when you deprive the tea plant from sunlight for X amount of days, it can vary based on the different style, the plant sends a concentrated amount of nutrients to its leaves as it's growing new leaves or flush. So when it's flushing new leaves for the harvest, you'll get concentrated amounts of amino acids in chlorophyll. Catechins are grown in the sun. Okay, just think about that. So the tea plant growing in the sun, they increase in catechins. Catechins have a very bitter flavor. When you put shade or like these tarps over the tea plant, then you increase in amino acids, specifically L-theanine. And L-theanine has a very sweet flavor. So the mastery and artistry behind matcha production is the producer's preference of mitigating and balancing those bitter catechins with the sweet L-theanine. And the pinnacle of that combination is basically the umami that you experience in tea. And so the artistry is that different producers can like have more savory matcha. They can have sweeter matcha. A lot of matcha that's sweet is really valued in the West, but a lot of people don't know. Like astringency is actually really prized in Japan and necessary for a balanced cup. And so like savory matcha can be a beautiful, delicious experience. So I'm going way back, pulling way back, because you can see how between the plant itself, and I'll get back to cultivars, but then like the shade growing and how the matcha is harvested all play into how the tea tastes and how strong it is, how like mature of a flavor it is, and what it's good for, and what it's used for. But to answer your cultivar question, going back to the tea plant, you've got the Camellia Sinensis, you have varieties of Camellia Sinensis. So it's kind of interesting to get your head around if you're not familiar with horticulture, because it is the same plant. It's all the tea plant, but you can over the hundreds and thousands of years, people have like found different varieties of the tea plant. So you've got Camellia Sinensis var, or variety Sinensis. That's the tea plant that's found in China, Japan, and mostly Taiwan, China, Japan. And then you have Camellia Sinensis varietal Assamica. So like that tea plant variety is much larger leaf. It's found in India, Sri Lanka, Nepal, and parts of China as well. So still tea plant, different varieties, but then cultivar is a cultivated variety. Hey, makes sense?
Buckle in.
Yeah. So humans have taken the variety of the tea plant and they want to preserve certain characteristics, right? So they'll clone different like saplings of the tea plant. They'll clone. People get freaked out that it's GMO. It's not GMO. Actually, GMO in Japan does not exist, which is really great. But in order to clone a tea plant, you like graft parts of the tea plant and like create new saplings, right? Because they want to preserve characteristics of the plant. So say a farmer noticed that 1 year this tea plant is really resistant to frost. And they're like, that's great. We want to preserve that characteristic. So cultivar is, on my end, we really look at it because of flavor, but for the most part, cultivars really help out farmers grow their tea. So they'll have, in Japan, there's over 300 registered cultivars of tea because they'll develop these tea plants. Say you don't want your tea plants all to harvest or be ready to harvest at once. You'll be super overwhelmed. So there's different cultivars that flush or are ready for harvest earlier in the year or later in the year. But for our purposes, each of these cultivars gives a different flavor experience, or they all have their own flavors. So, or flavor nuance. And you have that in coffee, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
and if any of you coffee fan listeners are hearing this and you're spooked by by graphs, then just know that if you're drinking coffee, especially if you're drinking coffee from, say, Kenya, you're taking this stuff in because there's a company out there called Scott Labs.
Scott Labs.
So who's done a lot in this field. So if you ever see what are they? SL38, SL42,
SL28.
SL28 and SL32, 4. I mean,
34.
there's a lot of them.
Those are
considering-
cultivars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And-
Okay.
Well, and it's just like, variety within variety. Because you remember,
Mhm.
what was it? Kingdom? What's the acronym? There's an acronym.
Oh, yeah. I don't know the acronym, but it's Kingdom,
etc.
Ah, crap.
Oh,
Mom, help.
Phylum.
Yeah.
Kings playing chess
Genus.
while
There.
sitting.
Species.
Yeah.
Family.
We won't
Family.
deliberate on this too much, but one way or another, like SL28 is is within the Arabica coffee. Family.
Yeah.
So-
I was flirting with my future wife during that class.
Mm,
So that's why I don't remember any of it.
there you
Wow.
go.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So, on one of our last radio programs here at Valor Studios, we had one of our favorite importers, Unblended. They are running a Colombia focused,
They're importers, but they're more than importers.
yeah, they're doing a lot more in the way of investing in young farmers in
Oh,
Colombia.
that's awesome.
Because the average age of a Colombian farmer is, then they say it was like 60
Like
something.
62, right?
But then he was saying like 4 years ago it was 55. And so it's just they're
Getting
trying to age
worse
out,
every year. So, in other words, like young people are not as interested in coffee farming, and a lot of that is because the parents of these young people that own the coffee farms, because it's a family business, are telling their kids to go to college and like go out and like don't take over the farm. Like, I don't know what their alternative is. I don't know if they're gonna farm something else or whatever, but a big part of what Unblended does is bringing young farmers into that job in Colombia, coffee farming. And they're doing that through giving those farmers recognition and spotlight and putting a face to the coffee that they're growing. And then also implementing these more experimental innovative methods in terms of like fermenting, doing different like processing methods like orange washed coffees, stuff like that. And so I'm interested, you're talking about this crisis is a extreme word, but I'll say crisis.
No,
The crisis of tea farming in Japan. Can you just elaborate on that more? As I'm sure you've had, more eyes on that than the average person.
Yeah, it's very similar to what you were saying. Is that for I think decades now, Japan has had a aging demographic and aging population. So just like the social impacts of just the birth rate is lower than the death rate, right? So that's been happening for a really, really long time. And then, as you said, and the same with Colombia, is that like a lot of the younger generation, they're just not interested in farming. They want to go to the cities, they want to, go get jobs. And I think it's a little different in that like family business in Japan is very sacred. And yeah, I'm not sure exactly what the conversations are, between parents and children, but I think for the most part, there's just more interest in other career fields. And farming's hard, and especially when you're dedicating it to one very, very, very niche specific product. So, for example, not a lot of people know matcha, as it stands presently, is only 2% of Japan's total tea production. And we totally take that for granted. We totally take it for granted because we just assume matcha's everywhere. So again, is it actually matcha what you're drinking? I like Mizuba Tea's bread and butter is matcha, and we love matcha, but we also have a heritage loose leaf line. And one of the most special teas that we actually purvey is gyokuro. And for example, as it stands today, gyokuro is 0.03% of Japan's tea production. And that is crazy because this is literally a style of tea that could die out in our lifetime if people don't have a desire to preserve that tradition. So when we talk about tea in Japan, a lot of what I talk about is how do we help producers and farmers who really want to preserve these beautiful, iconic cultural tenets and traditions. Like, how do we get people excited about tea? Because it's so beautiful. Like, we have the gift of pursuing vocation, and like these farmers really want to see these styles of tea live on. And so it's incredibly passion driven. There are dire numbers for the tea industry, but at the same time, the good news and the hope is that while the tea industry in Japan is currently in the decline, exports are increasing. So globally, there's a lot more people getting interested in heritage Japanese tea, which is very cool. So it's very refreshing when all of the shops that Mizuba Tea works with want to present matcha really, really well and want to carry the integrity of the farmers who craft it and maintain that line of integrity through serving it to people in the States. That is so neat. And that does give my farmers a lot of hope.
I'm wondering too, another thing that the Unblended guys said was that one of the reasons why farmers don't produce a higher level of coffee is because they just take the coffee from these different lots and then just blend them all together and then sell them at a lower price to a larger corporation because it's more of a steady business. Is that
it's a little
summary
different.
of what they're saying?
Sorry, continue.
That was basically my point. I was just gonna see if there was any similarities. You mentioning matcha being X%, very low percent of 2%. The overall export of Japanese. Yeah, thank you. 2% of Japanese tea. Is there any similar themes from what the Unblended guys were saying?
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because it kind of ties back to a little bit what I wanted to close out about the cultivars and use case for tea and flavor and how that impacts everything. Is that so producers can design teas for different use cases and still maintain a really high level of quality, depending on like how the tea is blended. So matcha actually as a product is like vast majority of the time always blended. In order to have really good matcha, generally speaking, the tea leaf. Oh yeah, I should say this. Matcha isn't actually matcha until it's been stone milled. So matcha cha in that character down there, if you can see it, that means tea.
Kanji?
So in Chinese and Japanese, that means cha is tea. So matcha literally directly translates to rubbed tea. So
Okay.
Ah.
yeah, exactly. So the tea leaves before it's been made into matcha is called tencha. And I mentioned that word before. You can only have true matcha if it's milled from tencha. But that tencha has to when it's freshly harvested, it's a little green. You know, it's got the flavors have to mature. So they'll keep tencha in cold storage for sometimes aging it for a couple years. Like if it's really climate controlled.
Whoa.
So in general, high quality matcha, they'll keep tencha in cold storage for 6 months to a year. So a lot of the fresh lot of matcha is blended from like 10 to 20% new harvest and 80 to 90% last year's harvest. Because in Japan, like it's not every farmer produces their own tea. It's like you've got farmers and then you have refining tea refining factories, and then you might have like a producer or like the artist that makes the tea. It's not always the case. Like vast majority of tea in Japan is cooperativized, which is great. It works really well. But there are some people who farm to finish. In Japan, that's actually kind of uncommon. So like that's why I use the word producers a lot, because the producers aren't necessarily always farming the tea themselves. They'll buy a lot of tea at auction in order to design the matcha that they want to purvey. The relating back to like what's happening in Colombia a little bit, I think what's happening now is that a lot of producers and farmers, the relationships I've had in Japan, I've worked with my producers for 9 years now, and I work with 8 tea farms in total. 4 of them are matcha producers, and so a lot of them will ask me like, what is the global market valuing? And so I live in 2 worlds, because as a person, as a deep-seated, beyond passionate tea enthusiast, I want to maintain tradition. I want to help these traditions live on. I want to be a conduit for my farmers' knowledge and simply not insert myself, but like just be a platform for them to share their work and what they're excited about. But over in Japan, they're just worried about how does this live on? What do I have to do to evolve the tradition in order for people to buy it? That's what they're worried about. And so it's a dance. You know, I feel like I think some of the controversy in Japan is like how to meet mass demand. I did an interview for Mic.com, MIC, and the article was called "Why Is Matcha So Expensive?" And because there's also like a cross-cultural rub where like we always expect certain products to be cheap, which is not great, you know? And when people realize like how difficult it is to craft or produce matcha, like the shade tarps I talked about, sometimes those cost up to 1 million yen to implement, you know? And so if matcha has exploded in popularity, a lot of farmers are wondering like, how do we meet that demand but also maintain the quality of the tea? So I can get really deep in here, but a tea usually flushes or is harvestable like 3 times a year. Sometimes 4 is extreme. Usually you should be pruning your plants at that point. But the most coveted harvest is first harvest in the spring. Second harvest is pretty like great. third harvest is usually lower quality or different types of tea, like hojicha or something. Hojicha is a roasted Japanese tea. We can talk all about that. It's so good. But so, for example, a lot of the energy going into shade growing your plants happens first or second harvest. And then a lot of farmers are like, wow, we need to meet so much demand that they're maybe milling, say, fourth harvest that's not even shaded and still calling it matcha just because it sells. But is that matcha if it hasn't been shaded? I know that's really complicated because that's digging deep into Japanese tea agriculture. And then another point I mentioned is like stone milling. If you go on Mizuba Tea's website, we've got pictures and articles all about how matcha is milled, but there's several ways to do that based on the scale of where you're at. So the most traditional way to do it, and it's at my office, I wish I had it at home, but we have a stone matcha mill. And historically, those mills only revolve 30 revolutions per minute to grind 1 tin of tea. So this, if you can see me, this tin is 30 grams. And it takes about an hour to grind 1 tin of tea using a traditional ishiusu or stone mill. So it takes a really long time. When I place orders for Mizuba, they'll run those mills 24/7 to fulfill orders. So if you're a company and you just want to mass consume matcha and have like, I don't know, 1,000 kilos, how are the farmers going to meet that demand with the capacity that they have? So even in Japan, there's kind of a question mark of like, oh, if this tea leaf, if tensha is milled using a giant air jet mill that just completely pulverizes the tea, is that still matcha? You know? So those are some of the questions that
Tell
are
me
happening.
this. This is a really, I think our listeners will like these kinds of answers and questions because a lot of them are starting businesses. They're specifically starting coffee companies.
Oh, wow.
And so I think getting into the nitty gritty of inventory and things of this nature that are highly scintillating for a podcast radio session will be acceptable to our listenership. So when you talk about managing inventory, you're working with producers in Japan, obviously across the world, and they're like 14 hours ahead or behind, right?
I think it's 11 for her, right?
Depending on the time of year. Oh, yeah, 11.
Depending on the time of year.
Or more,
Yeah, right.
right?
Who knows? Who knows anything about time anyways? It's just a construct.
Wow.
Amen.
The earth is flat.
We just got cut.
It's 16.
Anyways.
It's 16 hours.
Okay. 16. So you have all of these different wholesale partnerships across the nation. How do you manage your inventory working with a producer that's across the world and also, pardon my French, takes forever to make the product? like you said, running the mills 24/7.
Yeah.
That sounds like it would be hard to manage that kind of inventory. I guess but the shelf life is a year, so that's great. But how does that work?
It hasn't been that bad, I would say. It hasn't been terrible. I feel like the best thing, or it wasn't really, part of it was intentional decision, but one of the best things I did for Mizuba was to grow slowly. There was plenty of opportunities where we could have said yes to a certain client that would have been like, hey, we need, I don't know, 800 kilos a month and we want it at bulk volume discount. But if you really look at the power in your ability to say no or yes and how that shapes your business, I think you just really need to understand what you're saying yes to. So for example, if I said yes to those sorts of opportunities, not only would I like outstrip my own capacity, but like, is that the best decision for my farmers? Like, do they have the capacity to scramble and like meet that demand just for the sake of meeting demand? Or should we say like, no, actually, in order to maintain quality tea, we have this amount of kilos per month and that's great. So I think understanding your own limitations and the positive effects of that are very powerful. And then, like, you have to think about your goal. So is it my goal just to grow Mizuba for the sake of my own growth? Or is it the question of like, how am I supporting my producers and farmers, which is honestly the only reason I got into this business, is to be like, these teas are incredible. I just want to share them. And yeah, I think it's interesting too, because a lot of like business, what's the word I'm looking for? A lot of people see business in America with like founder stories and putting a lot of spotlight on like the people that start companies. But I'm actually like, I'm not like super shy. I'm an extremely extroverted person, but I've never wanted to be like the mascot of my own company. You know, I kind of want to be in the background or a platform for my farmers' work. And so if my main goal is to share what they have, I'm working within their limitations. But then even like the work that we do together, like grows my farm partners' businesses. So for example, we worked on a project for a few years, and like one of my producers was able to open actually two of my producers totally bought new buildings just by virtue of working with us. And I don't want to say just by I guess I don't want to say working with us. It's like Mizuba is essentially their brand in America anyway. So you know what I mean?
And you were saying too that some of the producers that you work with, like 100% of their lots go to you. Is that true?
Yeah, for
crazy.
a few of our farmers, we are their exclusive supplier in America.
Can you
They might
just
sell
tell me about like
domestically, you know. Sorry. I was like they'll sell domestically
Yeah.
and like, you know, they still have their other channels, but
in Japan?
for America, yeah.
That makes sense. I'm interested to hear, you know, you mentioned like scaling your business from, you know, the French press days to where you are now. You're talking about growing slowly. We also are trying to grow and scale our business, and we are constantly having conversations about like, how do we do that? Why do we want to do that? And yeah, like how fast, what's the direction? You know, we thought we wanted to go this direction for a little while. We thought we wanted to, you know, now we're kind of on the like, we want to be podcast stars. And, you know, and that's obviously really working out for us.
You want to hit the charts.
But for you,
Tens of listeners.
Dozens and dozens of listeners.
yeah, the
Hey,
pounds,
smash like,
smash like, guys.
by the way.
Just can you just give us some business coaching advice for just some things you've learned on scaling Mizuba, you know, on the employee level, on the money level, just your general happiness, just any of the things you've noticed and learned in that journey.
Oh, wow. What a honor to answer that question too, first of all. It is funny to answer from a very personal perspective because, again, like my employees always make fun of me because, like, I have been known in interviews to be like, I never wanted a business.
Still don't.
And so, yeah. But I think it can be a very scary place to do what you love because for a lot of people, like the business and capitalist side of things can ruin it for people. But for me, I've just come to understand like it's the greatest gift for these farmers to entrust their teas to me, especially back then. They're like, here, 22-year-old Californian girl, sell tea. You know, like that's wild.
Wow.
And so it was such a, again, I think it's one of the greatest gifts of my life to be entrusted with that. And so it's my understanding of like everything I do in business is how do I steward that gift well. So growing slowly, truly understanding what your decisions will imply. And like, I think you said, like, you have to really understand why. Like, why am I making this decision? And I think it's really interesting for people our age in business because, like, I think there's just so much conversation about growth for the sake of growth. And I've kind of had this conversation with other people as like, why do you need to, are you are you trying to appease a lot of investors? And if that's your case, then that could be right for you. But like, I think a lot of people look at other companies and like, oh, they're growing so fast, they're taking over the world. And I'm also like not a competitive person. So I'm just like, I don't feel the same hustle pressure to just be like, oh, well, we have to compete. We have to do it for the sake of growth. When I first started hiring employees, like I had to like take a step back and be like, oh, how do I explain Mizuba to people? Like, what is their business? And so a lot of people are like, oh, are you a startup? Are you just like, what kind of company are you? And I think at the end of the day, like Mizuba truly is just a small family business. We've been around for 9 years. I call myself small. We currently service over 600 wholesale accounts across the nation. So, I mean, it's relatively smaller, big. That's just wholesale. We also have nationwide and international retail.
Yeah, that's super small. 600 is super small.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's all relative, right? I mean, so that's currently where we're at. But again, like it's been 9 years. And so as a small family business, it's me, but my husband, Dan, is the COO. We've hired 2 of our best friends, both my parents. I don't like to say they work for Mizuba because they tell me what to do a lot. But both my parents.
They work with Mizuba?
They work with Mizuba, like both my mom and dad. My mom is running. We import straight to California and they take care of the matcha down there and ship it out. I think actually my mom has shipped some Valor shipments. Normally we send it from Portland, but I think there's been times where she sent it from California. So
wow. What a blessing.
It is a blessing.
So I guess on that, one thing that we hear a lot is people always ask about hiring friends. And it sounds like you've hired your friends. They probably still work for you now, so you maybe don't want to get too down and dirty. But how's that been versus like just maybe the other alternative was like posting a job listing and just kind of seeing.
And we've done that too. We have done that too. I don't want to make it sound too insular, but you're right. Actually, we hired another one of my friends just a week ago.
Busted.
Yeah, I know. It's funny because, y'all have to understand. I've worked in other capacities, but I actually started Mizuba right out of college. So I actually don't have experience like working in the corporate world or working for other companies. And it's kind of this blessing and curse of like I don't know. Yeah, I don't really have entrenched experience from like what working for quote unquote a normal job is like, and I only know how to do things like it, and it's given us a lot of freedom of like how do we create this ecosystem, right? So Mizuba is a very relational company. Mizuba is truly only built on relationships. It's built on the relationships I have with my farms. It's, I mean, I hired my husband. Like, it's built on like a relationship. So I think it's a really sweet opportunity for truly doing life together in a weird way. It's like I can't think too much the fact that I'm responsible for people's livelihoods. I do think about that a lot. I'm very intentional, but on a day-to-day basis, like respect that, understand that, and also create a safe space for people. And we just do life together. I don't know if that's too much of a simplistic answer. There's a lot of respect for like boundaries, and there's a lot of respect for what my friends need, but it hasn't been too crazy. I'm trying to think of the best way to answer that. Just being a good friend, you know?
Yeah, work to maintain any relationship, whether that's inside of work or a friend. Yeah. And in your case, and sometimes our case, it's the same.
Yeah. I have a question that's really important.
Wow.
What is it? That.
Please tell.
So, would you rather have really terrible matcha or, you know, after what you said, you know, imposter matcha.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Or Southern style sweet tea?
Oh.
Like to drink?
Oh. Oh, honestly,
Lordy.
well, they're like, apples and oranges, right? I feel
Mm.
so. I
Amen.
mean, my
Yes.
day to day is sampling tons of tea. I get sent tea all the time, and there's so much I say no to. So I actually drink and sample quite a bit of bad matcha. It happens. And so I will say I would actually rather have the sweet tea because I want to experience what that very important cultural aspect is in your part of the world. I want to experience that tenet of Southern culture. I want to be like, I want to know what sweet tea is like. I actually don't know if I've ever had sweet tea.
Oh my gosh.
Hey,
Whoa.
I really don't like sweet tea.
It
That's
just
okay.
tastes like sugar.
It
Yeah, it
does.
probably
What's
is
not
for
to like?
sure. Yeah.
But
But
I
again,
think when my mom makes a pitcher of sweet tea, she puts a cup of sugar in it.
Yeah. Like she should.
Yeah. And it tastes like sweet tea. It tastes like sugar.
I think it's like
Yeah.
I don't have to like it, but I want to experience it. Does that make sense?
Sure.
We'll mail you a cup of or a gallon of Chick-fil-A sweet tea.
Freeze dried.
We'll
And then add water. And all you got to do is stir it. Any temp. Okay.
All right. Hey,
Great.
I have a question that is similar
Okay.
but different.
Well, can I interrupt really quick? A fun fact about
100%.
Lauren Purvis is that I've never had Chick-fil-A.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well,
Yeah, fun fact.
At this point, I feel like if you've never had it, if you do have it, you'll be like kind of let down.
I know.
It's kind of like the In-N-Out burger thing for us here.
I mean, I wasn't let down by that.
Oh, sorry.
But
I've never had it.
No.
Or the Whataburger. People are really into that in Texas.
It's fine.
Or Buc-ee's or whatever. I don't know.
Let's keep
going.
searching.
Okay. So you were saying that 2% of the tea industry in Japan is matcha.
Mm-hmm.
So without you bad mouthing the big dogs out there, would you just say like if a Starbucks or a Dunkin' says that they're offering matcha, most likely would they just be offering a powdered green tea beverage?
Potentially.
No hate, just like a
No hate.
just like
Potentially. So it's
math
interesting.
wise.
Yeah. I was going to give y'all a pop quiz at the end of at the podcast, and I want you to remember what 4 points make matcha actually matcha. But before I have you answer that, it is interesting because other countries will try to sell powdered green tea and call it matcha. So you don't know, maybe they're getting their powdered green tea from Taiwan or China. And it's actually one of the craziest things. I had somebody within the tea industry tell me that their demand was so large that they had to start tea plantations in Australia to meet demand for Japanese green tea. But I was like, why are you telling me that?
Oh my
that was the
gosh.
vice president of a very large Japanese green tea company. So
Wow.
it's interesting. It's like it's kind of similar. I think this is the same with Kona coffee or geisha, right? It's like there are companies that will say, "Oh, this is 100% Kona coffee," but then there's like variables and elements that it's not really. Have you guys heard of that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
Oh yeah.
just based in my own very niche specialty place with Mizuba and like wanting to support very small heritage family run farms, I kind of stay in that lane. But there are companies out there that want to meet mass demand, and so that's the kind of ticky-tacky area where like, what is matcha really? And I only know what my farmers tell me. So
Can I answer the pop quiz?
I think I could too.
oh, it's answering
Okay.
the pop quiz.
Wait. You don't listen and I'll say it then. I'm just kidding. You go ahead.
No, you were really
You
excited.
really wanted to. So
Well,
why don't you go
I
ahead?
have 3 and I was like, which one's the 4th like must? But I know that it's shade grown from Japan,
Yeah.
stone milled.
Yeah.
And the 4th one was it that it needed to be the tencha tea?
Oh my gosh, you nailed it.
Wow.
Nailed it.
Get this guy a job.
Were you gonna say that too?
I didn't have the tencha bit, but who's to say I wouldn't have remembered?
Right.
You know.
Yeah, you're so smart. You could have recalled. Man.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, what do you wish? You're talking to a group of guys that run a coffee company, and we serve a good bit of matcha. You have our ear. You also have the ear. You also have the ear of a lot of other people that are in the coffee business / tea business. What are some things that you just want to say to people that like offer matcha in their cafe, but it's not like their main thing? So they should know a couple of pointers. What are some pointers that you'd give us for like high volume cafe? We don't know much about matcha. We're always like training on coffee, and then we're like, oh yeah, for matcha, just do this, and this. What are like the this, and this of matcha?
That's a great question. And I would say that I do have a lot of coffee shops coming to me saying like serving matcha doesn't seem feasible for a high volume cafe because it seems like there's a lot of steps or elements that would slow us down. And I would say that's not necessarily true. And actually, because given the fact that Dan, my husband, has worked in coffee for 9 years. My family in Portland actually owns 5 coffee shops. I am the sister-in-law of the 2 Purvis brothers that own Good Coffee. And so I'm surrounded by a lot of coffee people. And because of that, our team at Mizuba speaks barista, and we actually help design bar flows and just processes for serving matcha based on your individual shop. So I would say talk to Mizuba. I would say talk to us. And just based on your setup, there are ways to still serve matcha and preserve the integrity of the tea and really showcase that quality in a high volume setting. It is possible. In fact, actually, shout out back to Dune Coffee, French Press, our tight bros at Mizuba. They still use the Chosin bamboo traditional tea whisk to make each individual cup of matcha. And as I mentioned, they go through a kilo of matcha a week. It is possible. And like their Saturdays, I'm sure like Valor can attest to that too. Yeah, especially if you serve over 1,000 drinks, like there are ways to still maintain the quality and make it work for your bar flow.
It's kind of easier and more consistent than espresso as far as like the bar flow, in the preparation, because with espresso you risk like channeling the shot. You got to get it the right weight, and then the shot might run fast or slow, and then it might sit there for a second or whatever. But matcha is just like the bit in our cafe is when someone orders a matcha, the concierge, aka the register person, is like matcha, and then the production team is like matcha, and then they just get a whiskin on the Chosin, which I thought it was Jason.
No, it's Jason with a J.
But Jason's not here today, and that's okay.
I will say one of our team members at Mizuba, he once was like, you know what, Lauren? And he worked at Dapper and Wise Coffee for a long time, if y'all familiar with that back in the day.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Big fans of their videos.
So the gentleman behind those videos actually works for Mizuba.
No way.
Get him on camera. Where is he?
Graham, if you're
Can
listening.
He hear me? Hey!
No, Graham.
Dude, be funny. Be funny for us.
Graham, spoiler alert, he films all Mizuba's videos. So if you go on our YouTube channel, the gentleman behind all the Dapper and Wise videos shoots all of our videos. And he is a good buddy of ours.
Yo.
Yeah.
Let's collab.
That's awesome.
So Graham, now that he has spoken in this podcast, he once came up to me. He's like, you know what, Lauren? I think that making matcha is actually faster than serving espresso. And I was like, oh my gosh, are people going to get really mad at me? Like, them's fighting words, right? And he's like, no, I truly believe that if you know how to whisk correctly, it's faster than pulling a shot of espresso. And I was like,
I'm Team Graham. I'll say it.
Yeah.
Right here.
I've
Me
always
too.
been Team Graham.
Yep.
Yeah. Amen.
yeah. So
Yeah. Well, if you're listening and you are starting a coffee cart or you have a coffee shop, then man, check out Mizuba.
Run, don't walk.
No better place to go for your matcha moments.
Yeah, and I love obviously the product, but being able to, you guys are always so open to do fun things, giveaways, Instagram things. I'm not really over that kind of stuff. I just know that it's happened, and that means so much.
Can I also just say it's really impressive that though we be one of 600, you make us feel like one of one.
Wow.
You and your team make us feel like one of one.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
I'll say that for
I'm crying.
business people too. I'm not. You're not crying. I'm crying. No, I will say for the business listeners out there, again, not having gone to business school, and the only thing I know how to do is be friends with people. And I think that one of the greatest joys in what I think really fuels Mizuba is the fact that we want to have really solid relationships with all of our shops. So we offer free ongoing training. As I mentioned before, we try to give free training resources to all of our shops anytime because, your industry has a lot of employee turnover. And I know what it's like when you have set systems, but then maybe you have to hire a whole new crew and then they weren't there when I originally trained your original crew on how to make matcha. And so we actually have resources for that to retrain all of your employees and make sure all the managers, when you get questions at your concierge or at your cashier saying from customers, you're like, oh, what is this stuff? Did my espresso eat kale? And you're like, no, actually, let me tell you, this is matcha. It's direct from Uji, Japan. So we want to ensure that, again, our role is to just be a conduit for all the knowledge that our farmers have. And our producers and farmers are somewhat relying on you as baristas and coffee shops to be able to speak about it well. So that's going back to us is that we really just value fun. We value having a lot of fun and we value education. And so coffee shops are just great places for both those things. And so therefore we have great relationships with a lot of our coffee shops.
You want to wrap us, Big T? Sign us off?
No, I don't. I'm having the time of my life. Hey, when can we all hop over to Japan together?
Yeah, origin trip, Japan style.
Yeah, you sign up. You let me know. We are hoping to go back 2023. May, we always tend to go for Shinsha season, harvest season, just when the first flush happens. That's really fun. It's a great time. On average, we go about every other year. Our last trip was scheduled for May of 2020. So we're hoping to go back in May of this upcoming year.
Very nice.
So hop on board.
Well, hey, yeah, totally. Thank you so much for coming on our show. Thank you for dealing with our
Lauren,
extreme lateness due to our technical issues,
Good.
and for just being a champ. You guys are
You're
one
awesome.
of, if not our favorite partners. So
wow, y'all just made my day. No, I'm blushing. I feel like here's the thing. Your coffee shop is
Straight
definitely
I'm
spoken
crying.
out by name all the time in the Mizuba office. Whenever we get emails from, all your crew, we just have so much fun. We rock the Valor shirts. Actually, I bought all my employees Valor shirts. Did you know that?
No,
I didn't.
I had no idea.
We all survived
thank you.
Matcha
Thank you.
Madness with you. Yeah, we all survived that month of Matcha
Aw.
Madness. But
I remember pulling those.
Mm-hmm. You've set some serious
That
Mizuba
is
Tea
awesome.
records, so do credit for that.
well, hey, I can't wait until March already.
Yeah,
I know.
Maybe we'll have to come up with another reason for the season, huh?
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, hey, thank you so much. Hey, you're now a friend of the program. Welcome on anytime. So you're just the best.
You're
Oh,
awesome.
the best.
If you're listening to this and you want some great matcha, or you want some great, video content, Instagram content, follow Mizuba on Instagram, and make sure to buy their delicious product at their website or at your local Valor.
Coming soon near you.
Yeah. Well, hey, thanks again, listeners. We love you.
Thanks, crew. Valor's the best. Thank you.